study on Peloton, shocking, I know, in which I won a case writing competition. And this case study is actually now published. And for the role that this case study is performing here today, right now, we're going to look at kind of an angle on the case, and that is to start to kind of look at and think about Peloton and how they approach pricing strategy. So the case study that I wrote centers on pricing strategy, but also elements of understanding the brand community that's involved with Peloton and the dynamics of the social interaction around the fitness tech space. But in the interest of time, I think that probably the most appropriate for us is to think about this pricing angle and pricing dimension. So first and foremost, I do assume that you might be at least topically aware of the company Peloton. Just out of quick curiosity, and when I conduct my classes, at least my classes, they're very much a discussion-driven class, lots of interaction. Now, I do know that you haven't done the reading for this particular case study. So I will talk a little bit more than I might normally, but here's one point I would just kind of like to get a little bit of feedback from you folks, which is, do any of you have a Peloton, or do you use a Peloton, or is this something new to you?
I have a neighbor who has one.
You have a neighbor who has one. Carolina, how about you?
No,
No? Eric?
no
No,
exercise for me.
yeah, I
Eric,
don't
do
have
you?
either. I have a close friend who has one and speaks a lot about it. But that's about as much as I know of it. Do know that it blew up over the course of the lockdowns.
Okay, right on. Mayombe, are you familiar with Peloton?
No, I don't have any Peloton. I know about it, but I don't have any.
Okay. Okay, so actually, I think this will work quite nicely, because if one or two of you had been like, "Yeah, I have a Peloton and I use it every day," then I would probably have to be very, very kindly be like, "Okay, can you sit back just a little bit, just in the interest of engaging with the case here." But the fact that you know some other folks, and Eric, I think your comment there is quite instructive. That you're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, they talk about it a lot." And that is one of the things that really kind of makes Peloton a really interesting company, because of what it is that they're providing in a space that there's been lots of companies that aim for the fitness space. I mean, this is an area that's loaded with fads, from, really kind of gimmicky exercise equipment, all the way down to diets that, some of them work, and then there's other diets that are borderline harmful. So lots of people try to, make their way in this space, and it's loaded with companies that have kind of risen and fallen. But Peloton is a little bit different in a few respects. And so first off, I'd like you to kind of engage with this. And if you do have some background knowledge on this, try to neutralize this for just a second. Because as much as we're going to talk about Peloton, we really could be talking about any other company and any other product. And so first, I want us to zero in on thinking about, how would you price a product? With Peloton, this is an exercise spin bike. This is their core product. They do have some other products. They have a treadmill. We're not going to talk about that. And there is some rumors that they're going to be launching probably a rower here really soon. We're not sure quite when. But the flagship product is the Peloton. And first and foremost, the name Peloton actually is a cycling term. And what it refers to in a cycling race is when you have a lot of riders that are kind of clumped together, like in the Tour de France. That's actually called a peloton. And so they named it after this, kind of grouping, or like, I almost want to say biker gang, but not really biker gang, because, when I think biker gang, I think Hell's Angels, and it's clearly not the Hell's Angels. Although, for the way that many of the folks in Peloton oftentimes will dress in their athleisure wear, they could almost be a different form of biker gang, a slightly less intimidating biker gang, I guess. It'd be like they're all drinking smoothies. Now, if we're going to develop a new product, and we're going to launch this into the market, we need to think about how we're going to price it. How much how much, what do we peg that to be? And I think that it's important to understand that oftentimes folks will kind of take pricing for granted. They won't think that much about it. They just kind of like, oh, somebody else decided the price. It is what it is, and then we can argue about whether it's too expensive or what. And that's usually how the narrative goes. Is that people will complain that any product or service out on the market, they'll always complain that it should be less expensive, no matter what it is. But I think it's important that we understand that when we set pricing, it's not just the number that we're trying to capture. Pricing signals a lot of things. And I think probably the best example is if any of you have ever traveled internationally, and if you go to a country and you happen to be looking around at different products and whatnot, and if there's some brands that you're not familiar with, what are you going to use to know how that product is positioned relative to the competitors? So I once, many years ago, studied in the south of France, and I remember looking at some watches, and there were a number of watch brands I had never heard of. And I was a grad student at the time, so I couldn't afford Rolex, which was, I obviously knew what that one was, too expensive for me. But there were a number of other brands that I had never actually ever heard of. And so what happened is you kind of revert to looking at things like price. And price ends up conveying something with it. So if it's really, really inexpensive, I might then be drawn to the conclusion that perhaps it's not of very high quality. Maybe the craftsmanship on it isn't quite as good. But that's a pretty simplistic approach to thinking about products and understanding pricing. So first off, let's emphasize the fact that the Peloton, yes, if you get on a Peloton, you're going to be working really hard and you're going to be going nowhere fast because it is a spin stationary bike. But what's important to emphasize first here, though, is that it's not like the stationary bike that you'll find at your neighbor's garage sale for $25 or $50 that they've had for 5 or 6 years, which really just became a place to hang up, wet clothes. Because oftentimes folks will buy stationary bikes with the intention that they're going to get fit, and then it never happens. A spin bike is really kind of in a different product class in that the bike has to be able to take a beating. So this is not like that garage sale stationary bike where you might just kind of leisurely get on it, I don't know, read a book, turn a movie on. This is a bike that, again, if you've ever taken a spin class, it's a pretty intense workout. And so the bike has to be of a little bit higher caliber, a little bit higher quality than your standard run-of-the-mill stationary bike. Now, so the common approaches that we typically have when we're going to launch a product, when we think about pricing strategies, the first one, which is probably the most basic, is just cost plus. What is the cost of goods sold to produce it, and what kind of a return do I want on the product? If the product costs me $100 to make and I want to make 10% on that, then okay, 10% of 100 is $10. Okay, let's price it $110. There we go. And that's a very straightforward, very simple, not wrong, but very simple approach to pricing. Secondly, and this is probably more common to many startup firms, in that if they don't have a marketing professional in their ranks, they're more likely to just look at what the competitors are priced at and use that as a reference point to set their pricing. So my competitor is priced at X. I have a better quality product, or maybe I've got a product with fewer features. So I will then use that as a reference point to set my pricing. Skimming and penetration pricing. This one you're probably already familiar with this one when it comes to things like technology products, especially I know a couple of folks that are out here in the Bay Area. A lot of tech startups, new things that are newly available will oftentimes go for skimming, in that they try to capitalize on those early adopters who have more money than they know what to do with, and they will buy the product just so that they can have it first. And they're capable of paying a premium price. After the firm captures as many of these early adopters who have a lot of money as they can, then they might start to bring the price down. So you could look at this, probably the most common example that you guys could kind of look at is look at something like Tesla. The first Tesla car, which, actually the first Tesla cars, they lost money on every single one of them. Thank God they didn't sell anymore. The first Tesla Roadster, they lost about $30,000 on every car that they sold. But it was pegged at a pretty high price. And they were able to sell those. Why? Because there are some folks who make a lot of money and they had to have the car right away. Now, for the rest of us, we had to wait until the price comes down. By contrast, the other startup pricing strategy is penetration pricing, which is if my cost of goods sold is, let's say, $50, and I want people, and I need to build up a base of customers, maybe I'll price my product at $10. Yes, I am losing money, but I'm trying to price the product so low that people will adopt it. The easiest way to think of this one is think of any of your food subscription, the subscription boxes, the Fresh, the Blue Aprons, all of those. They oftentimes are doing penetration pricing to attract you to start and sample the product with hopes that you will graduate up into paying the full price. Now, ultimately, we end with value-based pricing. And this is where, at least from a marketing perspective, this is the most difficult one to apply, but the one that is likely to strike the right price to get the right amount of volume and profit to the firm, yet still give the consumer value for their money so that they don't feel they got taken advantage of. The problem with things like skimming, when you start off with a really high price, if you were to buy the product and then a week later they cut the price 20%, you'd be pretty upset. You'd be like, wait. What's the return policy on this? I just totally got screwed over here. If I'd have waited one more week, I could have saved more money. You wouldn't be very happy about it. So value-based pricing is really kind of the perspective of how we can think about the Peloton bike. Now, in this industry, we really want to recognize that this is a crowded industry that we could kind of break down into some sub areas. So the crowded market, we want to say we've got kind of the spa setting. Some of you are probably familiar that there are certain kind of spa gyms out there in which they're almost like a country club of sorts. They offer such high-end shishi amenities and services, and everybody there looks like they're pretty as all get out. And you're like, does anybody actually work out there? I'm actually not sure. I think people go there just to be seen and sip on smoothies. But everybody's got all matching athleisure wear and all that sort of stuff. We then have the other category, which I know you all are familiar with, and that would be the gyms. The place with all the weights and the equipment. The standard approach. A little newer are the boutiques, and this would be things like Orange Theory Fitness, if you are familiar with one of those, or Pilates studios, in which they focus in on a kind of specific either activity or a smaller setting, trying to strike a happy balance between like the big format gym, which sometimes can be a little impersonal, and still trying to give some kind of personalized service. And then of course, ultimately the home equipment, which you're all familiar with. But one of the things that we have to recognize is that we have a consumer behavior dimension going on here. And that is, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to guess that probably all of you have had a gym membership at some point in your lives, even myself. Clearly, I'm not using it enough. Hey, that wasn't funny. Now, the gym membership, remember, New Year's comes around, and we think that, January 1 is somehow some sort of like magical date in which we're suddenly going to get that six-pack this year, and we're going to get in shape. So we all run out, and all the gyms run specials. We get that gym membership, and if you do go to a gym, going to a gym in like January and February is not that great because it's usually, but come March, there's like tumbleweed blowing through that place because everybody, starts to lose their interest in going to the gym, and life gets in the way, and now you got to pack your bag, and So gyms and gym memberships, they skyrocket, but they have a problem. They have very high churn. So they sign up a lot of people, but the defect rate, the people who cancel, is very, very high. So gyms are kind of caught in this continuous cycle of needing to recruit new members because they're always shedding members of people who just finally, they signed up in January, they stopped going in March, but by July, they realize it's time to cancel the membership because they're just wasting money now because they're not actually going anymore. So we want to understand that one of the challenges in the fitness space is just recognizing that we need to develop habits to try to reinforce healthier lifestyles, or at least, staying connected with the activity itself. And so that's why the boutique and class format in the fitness space has turned out to be quite successful, in that this class dynamic tends to result in people kind of building friendship bonds with either the instructor or other people that they're working out with. And from kind of a human psychology dimension, if you want to develop fitness habits in particular, one of the surefire way to keep you on track is to work out with a buddy, because then you have a degree of accountability. Whereas you're like, oh man, you know what? I wake up early one morning and the bed, it's nice and warm and it looks like it's cold and wet outside. And I could just hit that snooze bar just a little bit more. And then your friend calls up and they're like, hey, I'm ready to go. Where are you at? And you're like, oh man, really? I was really hoping they wanted to sleep in too. Oh, I'm coming. And so you get around and you head on over there. So we want to understand that these social bonds are particularly important. Now, not knowing your backgrounds, just a real quick kind of a concept that really kind of underpins a lot of the marketing discipline is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So we want to look at the market and we want to divide it up into different groups through different characteristics, could be demographics, could be behaviors, could be psychographic elements, but try to group people together. And then from these different groups, we discern who it is most likely going to be responsive to our product. So we target these particular segments, and then we want to position the product to appeal to them. And what's most fun
One question, Matt.
Go ahead,
One
please.
question. I'm thinking that I don't know if you're going to touch this point further in the conversation, but on the buckets that you have made comments about, I'm thinking that you might have, when you're setting up a price, you might have your fixed costs, all that cost structure, right? But you are talking a lot of behavioral, right? That it's more like soft part. How much, or how do you decide, and maybe this is on industry wise, how do you decide what's more important? Because the hard points, which is the cost and your contribution margin and all those things that at the minimum I need to put a price of, but my industry is in luxury. It's not a grocery store. This is not a basic need. So I can definitely price. And then comes all these soft things that you're mentioning that are very behavioral. How much do you apply to each bucket? Which one is more important?
Well, that is, so I'm going to be able to give you a partially satisfying answer just in the time that I have here. So this is where you could do some market research. We sometimes refer to this as A/B testing, looking at different kind of features and finding out what consumers, what they respond to. So what if I put this combination with this combination? Which do you prefer? Oh, you like that one. Oh, you like that one. Okay. What about this feature with that feature? What do you think about that? Oh, that feature. Oh, okay. And you can start to develop some insight about what these groups of consumers prioritize. And based upon that can start to inform your pricing. Now, beyond that, and this is the part where I say is I'm only going to give you partially satisfying here, is because when we start talking about value pricing, we are talking about a little something, a little woo-woo here, a little fuzzy. And so what I'm going to get to here in just a couple of slides is start to talk about some of the elements that we can use to justify. Cost plus is pretty solid. I mean, these are my costs, period. If I charge less than that, I lose money. If I charge more than that, I can make money if I sell it in sufficient quantity. So that's very tangible. But once you get into value pricing, and you mentioned luxury, Value pricing is what underpins most of your upscale and luxury goods. We are playing off of perception. So like, I've been an entrepreneur for a good chunk of my life, and now I'm a college professor, so that obviously wasn't a good financial decision, even though I love doing this. You know, what I would look at maybe like a Louis Vuitton bag, and I'd be like, I just need a bag to carry something. And you know what? You're a Bay Area resident. I can spend 10 cents on a paper sack, which will accomplish the same thing as a Louis Vuitton bag. So why would I spend money on a Louis Vuitton bag? That seems silly to me. But another individual who is status seeking might go, I need to have a Louis Vuitton bag so I can show off to everybody else that I can afford something that they can't. You know, that's probably not what they're saying, but I think that's kind of probably what's going on. And so we are starting to play with perceptions and behaviors here. So we definitely don't get the tangible outcomes that, again, like cost plus does. But let me step a little bit further in here, and I think I'll start to address a lot of your question, Carolina. But this, again, does underpin a lot of your upscale luxury brands, and like things like Apple and again, Peloton's kind of in this realm as well. Like, where do they come up with their pricing? How do you justify it?
Right.
Okay. So when they first launched the Peloton bike, they initially priced it at $1,200. But the problem is at $1,200, that price signaled that the bike must not be of very high quality, because a studio spin bike has to take a beating, and they typically are more expensive than that. And so when they started this out, that $1,200 price point was not really resonating with customers. They just assumed that the bike must be cheaply made. It must not be of high quality. It's not gonna last. And exercise equipment in general, especially you get up over $1,000, starts to become expensive enough that people become more cognizant of its durability and its quality. And so in this scenario here, it was once they actually increased the price, the demand started to spike. And I think that this kind of makes an interesting element. Of course, I decided to present that here today, because generally what I find is students that are applying to grad school have at least a rudimentary understanding of economics to kind of understand supply and demand curves, at least enough to think that if I lower the price, demand is going to go up. And in many respects, that's not wrong, but except when it's not. And in marketing, we sometimes refer to these as Veblen goods. Goods that when they become exclusive, when they become more expensive, they actually become more desirable. So it kind of turns that thinking on its head. Well, where does that come from? Some of that comes from these kind of value-based pricing decisions. So I don't want to set a price. I mean, like, I don't want to take it to the extreme, being like, okay, let's charge $50,000 for our spin bike. Well, most people couldn't even afford that. And number two, a lot of people look at it like, no. So where's that medium point? Where's the point between so inexpensive that everyone thinks it's cheap and too expensive that they can't afford it? That's where we get this kind of gray area where value pricing sets in. So initially, when the Peloton bike was then launched, which kind of piggybacks off the quote from the previous slide here, they ended up pricing the bike at basically $22.45. And now I will concede, literally 2 weeks after I wrote the case study and submitted it for publication, they announced that they dropped the price. I think they did it just to spite me. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I didn't even make it to print yet. And there's one little element that's ever so slightly outdated, but they've recently lowered the price to $18.95. Now, with that initial $22.45 price point, they recognized that consumers do look at the price tag, yes. But what tends to drive their behavior? The payments. I worked in banking for a number of years in real estate, and that is one thing that we know from the housing crisis and everything, is that if you make the payments cheap enough, people will borderline ignore the price tag. They're like, oh, I can afford that. So 0% financing for 39 months. That gets you the bike. But then why do you use a Peloton bike? I know a couple of you are familiar with it, but for those of you that might not be, if you notice on the earlier slide there, we had a bike that had a monitor on the front of it. That monitor taps into classes, spin classes that are delivered via that monitor. Now that monitor, you can't watch TV on it. You can't play video games on it. You can't do anything. It can only be used to consume class content from Peloton. And so they have a number of instructors and they give you a variety of content. So one of the things that has made the Peloton so desirable and gets people, I think as Eric had said, who talk about it all the time, is the fact that if you, let's say you just bought the bike and you want to jump on and you want to do a ride, well, you can do some hardcore training on it. You can do high intensity intervals, you can do a climb ride, you can do endurance rides if you want, or you can do just some fun rides. Like you can do a 90s themed ride or an 80s themed ride or a 70s themed ride, or you can do a hip hop ride, or you can do, they even do show tunes things. So like there's a Hamilton ride that like a few 100,000 people have taken that Hamilton ride as they don't want to miss their shot. And so, no, Hamilton, nobody? No, I tried. So they, thanks, Ken. They get on there and there's, movie themes, a lot of fun things. There's even artist series rides. So, they recently did a White Stripes ride. There's an Elton John ride. There's all sorts of different class formats that you can tap into for whatever mood you might be in. So you get that content available for $39 a month. So if you're going to buy the bike, it's going to cost you $58 a month plus another $39 a month. And you have the bike plus the content. Now, to be fair, they also do have another option in case you don't want to buy the bike. Let's say you only want access to the class content and you've got an iPad or a phone. Well, they have an app-only option that you can get for $12.99 a month. And so for somebody who's like, yeah, I like the classes, but the bike's just a little too rich for me. Okay, that's fine. $12.99, you can go that route. Now, this is where I would like you to think for just a moment. Is the bike too expensive? At $22.45, and admittedly they did just drop it to $18.95 recently here. If $1,200 is, from the quote, too inexpensive, that establishes at least a floor. But is $18.95 too expensive? So here's where I think we've got a couple of arguments at play here. Number one, I refer to this as the nature argument. And the nature argument is it doesn't matter what your product is, it doesn't matter what industry it is, unless the price is free, somebody will complain that it's too expensive. It doesn't matter what it is. And if you need any proof of that, if you don't believe me on the surface, think about airlines. If I were to ask you guys, hey, think about taking a trip somewhere you'd like to go and think about how much it might cost. Let's say you want to fly somewhere, exotic and fun, and the price of the plane ticket was $1,500. I think it was United. Was United the one where they punched the guy? Yeah, I think it was United. If United were to suddenly send you an email with a promotional offer which says, hey, the price of that plane ticket that you were just thinking about, let's say it was $1,500, we'll take $250 off the price, but we get to punch you in the face. I bet a few of you would go, who's going to hit me? And do I get to pick which side? Because, I want to make sure that I protect my good side. In that, airline customers seemingly don't care. They just want a cheap price. They'll always think that it should be cheaper. And that's why airlines don't serve, well, the food was never all that good anyway, but they don't have the perks and the amenities anymore because anybody want it. So I refer to this argument here in the fitness space as the nature argument. And that is, why spend all this money on a bike? Why not just go outside and lift up heavy rocks? or run around the building. That's the cheap option. But that's also a functional based argument. The idea that I buy this for just that element of exercise. But what I have referenced a little bit earlier is the fact that there are behavioral dimensions in that working out with a friend, developing friendships, these social things. And there's a reason why I was referencing those really high-end spas. If people are paying just for fitness, then what the heck is going on with these kind of borderline luxury gyms and spas? Because there's not a whole lot of fitness going on there. There's a whole lot of socializing and hanging out and being seen, which means that in this space, you're not just selling these basic benefits. There's something else going on here. The upper bound argument is, what we may have a floor, but we definitely can't charge $50,000 for the price for the bike. So ultimately, what are they actually paying for? So, just out of curiosity, does anybody here have is anybody willing to play along? Does anybody have a gym membership, just out of curiosity? No? Okay.
Maybe not during the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So assuming that maybe you have had, okay, let me try this. Has anybody in the past had a gym membership?
Yeah.
Okay.
Many in the past, many.
Hopefully you guys will play along here just a little bit. It's more fun if you play along anyway. How far away from your house was the gym when you had it?
Well, 5 minutes.
About 5 minutes, not bad. Caroline, how about you?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. So that's pretty close. So if you want to get up and around and go to the gym, do you just throw the covers off in the morning and then immediately go straight to the gym? Or is there some other intermediary things that you do before you run to the gym?
I plan it throughout the day. So I'm saying like today I'm gonna go to the gym at 6. Maybe tomorrow I'm gonna go at 9, and like I plan during the day. So it depends on the day.
And I
Okay.
think that was the disruptive change, because bringing the machine to your house, it's like you see this thing speaking to you, like, I'm here. There's no justification on I have something to do before. Well, when you have your gym membership, you're just putting that in the back burner. I'll do it at the end of the day or whatever. I have to change clothes and all those things that come before going to the gym. I have to drive there or whatever. Well, if you have the machine at home, the Peloton or any other, you feel like you have to do it.
Excellent. So one of the major value drivers of Peloton, and I love everything you said, Caroline. I'm going to tweak just one little thing. You said the disruptive part. The thing that makes the Peloton slightly more interesting is that home fitness equipment's been around for a long time. And so what is it that results in exactly what you said though, Caroline, which is this feel that I need to work out, that I stay connected to it. So that's where there's something in the special sauce, because again, the Nordic, like the Nordic Track and the Bowflex and the ThighMaster, those have been around for like decades. And those usually are the things that are sold in a garage sale because no one's actually using them. So what I'm driving at here is that there's usually some planning and time involved with going to the gym. Now, both Caroline and Mamba, you guys had just 5 minutes. So that's pretty close. But you probably also had to pack a bag and maybe think about going there if you're going to shower at the gym when you're done. There's a lot more involved. So suddenly it's kind of like along the lines of, again, airline flights. Think about how people talk about airline flights. They almost always talk about the flight time, which is really incorrect, in that that's the time in the air. What about the time it took to drive to the airport? The time it took to get through security, the time that you had to wait for that, the time that you were taxiing to take off, the time that you land, that you then have to taxi to the gate, which I don't know about you guys, but at least when I've flown to SFO, whenever I'm coming back home, it always seems, for some reason, I have the worst luck when it comes to flying. I always get stuck on the plane. It's happened at least a dozen times, to the point that my significant other, because I'm the better half, she thinks I'm cursed.
in that, I always get the announcement, yeah, this is your captain speaking. We're waiting for a gate to open up here. It's going to be just a few minutes, folks. And it's another 45 minutes. Now, so how long was that flight? If it was a 2-hour flight, it actually was a 5 to 6 hour flight because of all the other time that was involved on each end of it. So the time that we would spend going back and forth, we need to factor that in as well. So the Peloton experience in the retail setting, we get an experience that's kind of akin to a Tesla showroom or an Apple showroom, in that it starts to convey a luxury experience or very high scale. It's a showroom. You could go in there and be like, I'm sold. I want to buy this thing. I brought a pickup truck. I'm ready to haul it home. And they're going to go, that's great. That's wonderful. You can buy it, but we deliver it to your house. You cannot cash and carry. So you go into this. This is just the showroom to get the feel and the experience, and they welcome you in. Now, let's go. This is kind of to Carolina's earlier question approach here, and that is, how do we look at what are the value drivers to underpin the pricing? So the indirect time cost, that is the time to pack your bag, the time to at least minimally get around. I don't know about you folks, but when I go to the gym, yeah, I don't get completely decked out, but I used to at least, maybe, wet my hair real quick and brush it, so it didn't look like I slept in my car. And, at least look kind of presentable. So there's time involved with that. There's time to get there. The time it would take for me to drive. Now, if it's 5 minutes, that's not so bad. But the gym that I used to go to would take about 15 minutes to get there. Not because it was that far, because of stoplights. Then there's the time after, of coming back, of showering, all that sort of stuff. The convenience factor, and Carolina, you did mention this one, the fact that it's right there. And convenience factors in with the choice. When you go to if you're going to go with a spin class at a gym, it's usually held at a certain time with a certain instructor, and you have to be there. The Peloton offers a variety of classes with a variety of instructors and a variety of formats. So if you're used to doing a 45-minute spin class and you wake up a little late one morning and you're starting like, oh, I don't know if I got time. That's fine. They got 30-minute classes. Don't have time for a 30-minute class? Do a 20-minute class. Don't have time for a 20-minute class? Do a 15-minute class. You got more time than a 45 minutes? You really want to hit it hard? 60-minute class, 75-minute class, 90-minute class. So it starts to take away some of the excuses that you would make that you don't have time. And so can you put, and the community plays a part as well. So what makes the Peloton really kind of interesting is that it has a number of kind of social interaction elements to it that reinforce community, that you kind of start to almost build friends you've never met, but they might work out with you. And that has an experience component that's on the Peloton platform itself, and also across some social media outlets. The vanity element here, I don't feel like I need to get around. Technically speaking, you could go ride on your birthday suit if you want to. I don't recommend it, but you could, not that I've tried it, but I'm just saying, I don't think it's probably a good idea. But you don't have to care about what you look like. In spin classes, if you've ever taken a spin class, people end up like disgusting sweaty in a spin class if you really work hard. And some people don't want to necessarily be around that. The comparable cost element, looking at how much do you spend on the gym. And one of the ones here that I think is one of the biggest drivers here is that, well, if you're like, I like the Peloton, but I'm afraid that I might not actually use it. Maybe I could go with an alternative that's less expensive. Well, Ken, I really should get commission on it. I totally agree. Here's the thing that is the real killer. Resale value. Oh, sure, there are a couple of rivals to Peloton, but they're not as well known and they're not as popular. And you might save a little bit of money up front, but if you don't use that bike either, you're probably going to be further in the hole, because the Peloton retains its value. and you can resell it for nearly as much as you paid for it. So with that in mind, I'd actually make the argument, and I do make this argument when I teach the case in the classroom, I actually make the argument that the Peloton should be more expensive, because the value drivers that underpin the product, coupled with the ability for resale, make it actually a less expensive option than if you were to go with some of the rivals that are not as well known. One other value part here, the subscription is tied to the bike, not the individual. So my significant other and I had a gym membership before we got a Peloton, and we each had to pay the membership fee to the gym. The Peloton is per bike, so it's $39 for up to 6 users on the bike. So if you have a family of 2 or 3 people that might use it, suddenly it's really, really inexpensive. Couple that with the community elements, and we say tribes, sometimes groups have formed. One of the groups that's formed that's real famous is called the Squexy Swarm, in which they kind of coordinate outside of Peloton to do social engagements and also coordinate rides. Like, hey, let's see if we can swarm that Alex Toussaint hip hop ride. Let's see if we can get 10,000 people in there. And then suddenly there'll be a class, and there's tons of users in it as they're all in there and giving each other the high fives. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to speed up just a little bit here as I'm going to wrap this up here. In COVID-19, yes, the company has absolutely skyrocketed. And because of that, they have some weaknesses that kind of emerged. In that, if you order the bike, you're looking at a 3 to 4 month delivery time. Now, supposedly recently, they've shortened that. Also, the instructors had to start filming content in their houses because of COVID-19 lockdowns, and studios needing to close that because it wasn't safe. And hopefully they're going to be returning to the studio here shortly. But the idea is that through these value drivers, Peloton, this is what has made the community of Peloton users to the point that, like Eric said, they talk about it all the time. And as even Ken said, yeah, I mean, I should almost get a commission on this thing. I have bought one. It is, I won't even lie. Of all the things I've ever bought, it's the best thing I've ever bought. It's actually fun to use it. And again, I know, could definitely use it a little bit more. And don't worry, after this, I'm probably going to go do a ride. But in summation here, this kind of a talk is very representative of a HALT class. And so one of the things that really kind of makes HALT as an institution really stand out is the experiential learning environment. We do expect you to be an active participant in that. We really kind of take personal ownership in your graduate education journey. Of course, you guys know about the global campuses, the fact that, yeah, other schools will allow you to do study abroad, but it's kind of a pain. For us, you want to study in London, you want to study in Dubai, you want to study in San Francisco, Boston, it's all HALT. So, you know, it's really easy and really seamless. And the professors that we have, all of us are either practicing professionals or we're publishing academics. I write a lot of case studies. So you take class from me, you know, it's going to be possibly studying some of the case studies that I've written, and I wrote them. So I can speak to the case study and then elements that maybe I didn't put in the case. They're kind of interesting. And we also have the hard and the soft skills. One of the things that I think is kind of fun that I integrate into some of my courses, or we'll do in an orientation sometimes, is things like, most individuals will know that networking events are important and that there's value to them. But oftentimes, folks don't actually know how to effectively network. How do you work a room? How do you make small talk? These are some of the kind of value add dimensions that we have embodied in the HALT experience that you oftentimes are not going to get from other schools. Sure, they'll have certain courses, but we have some of the other things in here that speak to developing these classes. We also have some unique classes that are very unique to HALT. The cool thing about a business school like this is that we stay on top of what is the newest current trend. So I just listed a few classes that are available at HALT that you're not going to find at other schools. There's another one I could throw on there, which I probably should have, which is the neuromarketing, looking at neuroscience to see how that integrates with marketing. There's very few schools that actually offer that. And so coming to HALT, you get the opportunity for, you know, why do you go to grad school? Most people go to grad school because they want to advance their career and they want to be upwardly mobile. But how do you do that? That's a product of what you learn in grad school. So the course offerings and having new current courses is extremely central to achieving your goal of advancing the career. So information, you are free to ask questions. I even put my email address up there, and those are some of just the areas that I teach in. So I want to thank you for this. I know I covered a lot here in quite a bit of time, but I'll open it up in case folks have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Professor Fisher. And yeah, we have a few more minutes here. If anybody has any questions for Professor Fisher about the case study or about his experience as a professor at Holt, if anybody has any questions regarding enrollment, I'm happy to help and jump in there. So does anybody have any questions for these last few minutes? Yes, Ken.
Yeah, appreciate you guys hosting this. Thank you, Mr. Fisher, for the lesson. What attracted you to Holt and want to be a part of the Holt community?
Great question. And so this is one where I'll kind of go off script a little bit here. I do teach and have taught at a number of Bay Area colleges. And so I can offer up this response from that perspective. And one of the things that really makes Holt stand out is the international student body. When I did my master's, I did do a study abroad, and at other schools that I've taught, there oftentimes is a contingent of international students. So I won't lie about that. But I bet most of you can think back to your undergrad years and think about some of the international students that you had in those courses. And there happens to be a very unfortunate phenomena that happens in many schools. And that is that the international students oftentimes cluster together and don't integrate so well or as much with the other students that are more domestic. And I don't think anybody's like trying to do anything harmful or malicious, but it is a phenomena that happens. One of the things that I think is really one of the hidden values at Holt is the fact that with such a diverse student body, you basically all have to build that network and that interaction with each other that does not happen at other schools. So I taught project management last term, and I think I had out of the class of, I forget how many were in the course. I think it was about 35, I want to say. I think there was 32 countries represented. Everybody basically, because of how much diversity and representation there is, ends up with this really, really cool social interaction dynamic that does not happen elsewhere. I know a couple of you are Bay Area, and so you guys can look me up on LinkedIn. I have taught at some other schools. I've taught at San Francisco State. That phenomena of international students oftentimes kind of clumping together, that happens there. And so you don't get that international element that you do get at Holt. And so, I mean, it would be really, really difficult to go through the Holt graduate experience and not come away with a really, really robust network of international friends and contacts. Like you would have to be like, all right, Fisher, challenge accepted. I'm going to figure out how to not talk to anybody and be mean to everybody so that everyone hates me. Like you would really have to work at it. And so I think that's one of the things that really stands out. The second element is the dynamic curriculum. So I teach corporate diplomacy is one of the classes that I teach. And that class will be offered at other schools in about another 5 to 8 years, because it takes that long to find people who can even teach this stuff, to develop a curriculum, to get it approved, to then even get funding for it. So yeah, maybe San Francisco State will eventually have corporate diplomacy, but it's at least 5 to 8 years down the road. And so if you want to get ahead, and that's part of your objective of getting a graduate degree, you're going to get that in spades from some of the courses that we have available that you can take, and some variety. So some courses we have are even like little 1-credit courses. I think it's the crypto course is a 1-credit course. At many public institutions, you have to have a full 3-credit course. Otherwise, it's not going to get approved. But we can still offer some of these smaller classes so that you guys can have the insights of some of the newest kind of cutting edge stuff that you want to learn about, so that when you get out and you want to weaponize
your graduate degree, you can go in an interview and talk about things on a level that your competitors just can't because they didn't take those courses. Not because they're
Right.
not smart. They didn't take those courses. They don't know about that.
I want to jump in there too, Matt, just to make a point. Those are our nano courses. So they are 1 credit courses. So you can actually, for electives, in order to get a 3 credit course, you can actually take 3 of those 1 credit courses. So they're smaller in length, but really impactful. So if you want to take a course on cryptocurrency or in blockchain and you know, business impact of drones, you can do that if you know those kind of technologies are interesting for you.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention real briefly like neuromarketing. My colleague Matt Johnson teaches neuromarketing. Just earlier this year, he published a book in neuromarketing called Blind Sight. Him and Prince Kuman, they're both here at Hult. That is a course that you can take from them. And I'll just be candid. Matt Johnson's a badass. That guy's awesome. He's a colleague of mine and I admire him. And so those are some of the elements that I think really differentiate Hult as an institution that make it such that I'm pretty proud to be affiliated and teaching at Hult. I look forward to teaching at Hult. The internet, the diversity that's in here, it's stuff that other schools aspire to, but Hult actually does it. And so that's the most candid answer I can give you, Ken.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Anybody else?
I'm wondering what's the latest in terms of dealing with the response to COVID-19 shutdowns. Does it look like we'll be going in person in the fall? Any updates on that?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So it's a great question, and our campus is actually open currently. So the San Francisco campus was closed for quite a while during COVID, unfortunately, but it has recently reopened in the last few weeks. So we definitely anticipate being open in the fall. Probably most of you are either have already applied or are looking for programs for this fall. And that is a time frame that we feel confident that we'll be able to be open, obviously with precautions being taken, and hopefully, you know, with the way that the vaccine rollout is happening here in San Francisco, it's happening very quickly, which is great. Happening pretty quickly actually at all of our campus locations in Boston, London, and Dubai as well. Those are our main locations. So so as long as that's, you know, that continues, then yeah, we're confident we'll be able to be open at all of our campuses. And if anything happens where that's not possible, we will allow students to start virtually and then transition in person. So we're really committed to helping you start on time, regardless of what that looks like.
Is the option of having like the mixed classes available, or everybody has to be either at the location or at home?
Yeah, that's a great question too. It will be mixed classes for most likely. Matt was mentioning our international student body here. So all of you are located here in the US, but we do have a lot of students coming from abroad, from other countries where, you know, the vaccine rollout is not happening so quickly, unfortunately, you know, where embassies are still closed. So they're not able to get a visa. So we will be allowing those students to start virtually. So your classes, even if you're in person, will probably still have the component of the hybrid, the hybrid component where some students are tuning in virtually, some are in person. But we've implemented some really cool artificial intelligence technology. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read that, or, you know, look at that, or talk to your enrollment advisor, but it's we've equipped all of the classes with cameras, and they're cameras that are dynamic, so they follow voice and they follow movement, and they give virtual learners a really dynamic, lifelike experience. And we've also equipped the classrooms with large screens so that students on campus can still interact and engage with students that are virtual.
Right.
And we anticipate that to be honestly the future of business anyway. So it's kind of a cool experience to learn how to navigate that kind of dual environment.
Okay, thank you.
That is really slick. I've fought with that now, and it's really impressive. The tracking cameras, there's multiple ones, multiple screens, so it's not just the like one screen. Everyone's got to look at it. They're immersive enough that that they're everywhere. There's only one danger sign, or one danger drawback, I should say, and that is one of the classes that I tend to move around a lot and interact when I'm teaching, or at least this is kind of my mannerisms. And if I step too far forward, it thinks that I'm a student and it triggers the other camera to come on. And it happens to be over and above. And I happen to be thinning apparently right there. So everybody got to see it on the screen. I was like, oh, well, there you go. If you ever want to know what your professor has an insecurity on, that's it.
Well, you're just going to have to learn your boundaries and not to step out of those boundaries so that we don't see that view.
Right.
Yeah, what other, I see Ken, you wrote in a question. Do you just want to unmute yourself and ask that, Ken?
Yeah, sure. I was just, wondering what the whole professors are like in Dubai, just because I'm always wondering what the talent pool is in terms of professors versus professors you can get in the US who live in Boston and San Francisco. And I'm sure they're awesome, but I just kind of want to hear it from somebody. And, I guess, are there major differences? Because you guys keep saying you can kind of go to all the campuses, but how are the professors teaching the exact same curriculum, but they're just different people so they can talk to you after class? I mean, what's the difference there?
That's a great question. So great to hear that you're interested in going to Dubai. It's an awesome location. And as far as the professors, so we also kind of allow our professors to rotate to different campuses should they wish. And the curriculum across campuses is the same for the same programs. So we've got the rotation period the last 3 months of the program. And, some professors are able to, if they're here in San Francisco, go to Dubai and teach some courses there. So in terms of the kind of caliber of the professors, it's all the same, all very high. We are, you may have seen, but we are accredited by the same organization that accredits Harvard and Yale, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, also AACSB, EQUIS, Association of MBAs. So we have these accreditations, and in order to maintain them, we do need to maintain the quality of the curriculum across all campuses. So the accreditors actually go to our different campus locations to monitor that. So in terms of the actual curriculum that's being taught, it is the same across all campuses. What does change is obviously the professors themselves and sometimes their background and their expertise, which tends to be influenced by the industries in that region of the world. So for example, here in San Francisco, we've got a lot of tech companies, so you might find more tech or, more kind of startup mentality in terms of our professors, entrepreneurial kind of mentality. The dean of our San Francisco campus here, he actually started a company called Win Watches, which created some of the technology in Google smartwatches. He eventually sold that company to Google, has started a few other companies. So, that's kind of the type of individual you might find here. If you're looking at Dubai, for example, energy is a huge industry there. Consulting and finance, things like that are bigger there as well. So it just kind of depends on that region and and what's more prevalent there. Ali Fenwick, who was actually supposed to do the event last week, he is a professor out of our Dubai campus, and I can just write his name in the chat. You might want to take a look at his LinkedIn, and that might give you also an idea of kind of he's been involved in a lot of different industries. So let me just type that there. But that is a good example of somebody out of our Dubai campus.
Awesome.
I know we're yeah, of course, we're running low on time here. So any other questions? We can stick around a few more minutes if others do have questions. Otherwise, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, this is related to a comment. I think someone else asked us earlier about the nano options, the electives. Are they based, where can we find more information on those? And are they based by location, or are there certain electives that are only available, for example, the Dubai campus versus the Boston campus?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So for all of our electives, both 1 credit as well as 3, we offer those at specific campus locations. Some electives are offered virtually. I believe you can only take maybe 1 virtual elective for your electives, and you do need to take 4 3-credit electives, the equivalent. So we're not going to obviously offer all electives across all campuses, and that is where you need to make some choices and kind of pick and choose. So you can go to all 6 campuses during that period if you want to go over and spend a month in Shanghai and do a few electives there. If you want to pop over to New York and spend a week there, the electives are generally going to be offered over like long weekends. So you have the flexibility during that last 3 months to go to these different locations, do an elective, and at the same time, you'll kind of need to balance, let's say you want to do rotation in London, but there's a few electives that you want to do in Boston, let's say, you can split your time. So you can build out that 3 months in a way that makes the most sense for you, depending on where you want to go and what electives you want to take.
Are those available online for us to see more details?
I don't know if we have the electives actually published online. I believe they're in the brochure. So take a look there. If you can't find them, Carolina, are you working with an enrollment advisor now?
Yeah, I can ask John. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because we have a ton of electives that are offered each year, but we may not publish all of them just because they're not all necessarily offered every single year. It kind of, what we do is we do like a poll for students as to which classes are the most in demand, and then we'll build our electives around those. So that happens before the elective period. So you'll be able to express interest in certain electives that are more interesting for you. But yeah, check with your enrollment advisor, and otherwise, I do believe that we have the electives, a good chunk of the sample electives listed in the brochure in the academic portion where it lists out the different degrees. All right, well, what I will do too is I will put my email here in the chat for any other questions. And you all can feel free to reach out to me, and either myself or a colleague of mine will be able to help if you have any questions, or if you haven't applied, if you would like to apply, just feel free to reach out to me here. And I know Professor Fisher gave his contact details, so I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any additional questions post this session as well. So thank you everybody very much, and very happy that you were able to attend today, and we'll look forward to hopefully welcome you to help soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.